Welcome everyone. Can you hear me now? I have a few introductions to make. It's my pleasure to introduce the seminar speaker today, Rodrigo Beas. I have a few announcements to make first, and those are that all audience participants will be muted throughout the seminar. Please don't attempt to turn on your video or share your screen during the talk. And there will be an opportunity for the audience to ask questions live at the end, just like a normal seminar. Once the speakers finished their talk, you can use your Zoom raise hand feature to notify the meeting host that you'd like to ask a question. And the raise hand feature is located under the participants tab at the top of the Zoom window. So again, it's my pleasure to introduce Rodrigo. He is a professor at the let me say this in English. He's a faculty member at UABC, the university in Ensenada. He did his PhD at UC Santa Cruz, and he's did a postdoc after this at Hopkins Marine Station. He is a professor down again in Mexico, and he's founded the MexCal, which is a binational effort between Mexico and the US to study kelp forest ecology. And he's both a quantitative and field marine ecologist focused on the sustainable management of coastal marine ecosystems like kelp beds. And we're really excited both to have him here today. He was instrumental in getting us to teach our last Baja class at Isla Natividad, where he supported us through both sending 2 excellent students of his with us to the field, and supported us in a number of ways that we hope to repeat in the future. I'm going to let him talk about his recent work, but some of the highlighted papers are looking at the geographic variation in kelp forest communities in the coastal ecosystem in California, where he's looked at range extensions of different species that he'll talk about. I liked his title because he was the co-sponsor of the recent WSN meeting down in Ensenada. And he started out with this slide, Science Without Borders. And because species don't have borders, why do we? And he has been really instrumental at trying to incorporate researchers from across nations to look at some of the common questions we have in kelp forest ecology. So thanks, Rodrigo, for joining us, and we look forward to your talk.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's truly an honor to come here virtually and share with you a successful example of transboundary research across the Californias, the Baja California and the Alta California. And my talk today is about promoting science without borders. Specifically, I am going to talk about an example of how temperature ecosystems in this area, such as kelp forest, are going through a thing we call tropicalization, and how this challenge can be faced or can only be faced if we work together. So by the turn of 2020, these 3 characters got together to sign the reestablishment of the Commission for the Californias. This was a great step by our politicians that have in this area to promote regional integration, cooperation, and also promote the search for solution for our common problems. In a very similar fashion, these 3 other characters signed a contract blindly long time ago to support all these ideas, and they kept their work and they've been supporting. So I would like to acknowledge these 3 champions that are the direct responsible for a lot of what I have to say today in these kinds of presentations. And obviously there are way more of you out there with similar experiences and shared goals. And thus I really hope that we can eventually merge these efforts in a bigger network. One of these examples of coordination is, like Dai say, is this special number of the Ciencias Marinas magazine. All the papers were published both in Spanish and in English, and they were led by the editorial board. specifically La Jefa, Diana Steller, who was very, very important for this thing to happen. But what I want to highlight here is that there are these Californians, Steve and Kyle, and there are the Baja Californians, Julio, Alicia, and I. But there's also these two, Bernardo and Sergio, from our sister system in Chile. And so I hope that during this talk, we can spark a bunch of ideas, of cool new ideas on how these collaborations can bring all these cool experiences and adventures. And so to business. This is the graphical abstract of one of the recent papers that I had the honor to coordinate, and I would like it to use it as a framework for this talk. Here on the left side, you can see a map of the Californias in color coding going from north to south. These are things that we call ecoregions, Northern California all the way to Baja California Sur. Also in this image, you can see a bunch of red dots along the coast representing different monitoring programs. These include PISCO, Reef Check, MEXCAL, the UABC program that I'm helping with, and COBI and Stanford dataset. And so with the integration of all these massive data sets, we were able to estimate the community structure at two different points in time, 2008 and 2016. And with this 10-year difference and with a little bit of mathematics, we were able to estimate the structure of the system in 30 years after that. So we report changes in the community have been drastic, but more evident in the north and in the south of this map. And interestingly, these are the two sites where people are most connected to the fishery. So it's very interesting that. And the other thing and relevant result that I'm going to tell more details later is that we calculated a migration of this system going poleward. So this is another of those examples of integration and working together across the border to understand better these systems. So for my talk today, I'm going to describe what I consider most relevant about my research program that we can start or continue conversations to move this forward. First, environmental variability, then a little bit of kelp forest, drivers of change, and what drivers of change, such as marine heat waves, that are the most important recent drivers that put us all in check, is doing kelp forest. Some of the why this community is migrating north, some ecological impacts, and lastly, I am going to present how we're trying to integrate this information in a transdisciplinary framework of socio-ecological systems in the coast. So first, environmental variability. Environmental factors are dynamic in time. There's cold and warm in time. There's different seasons, and the variability is usual, it's normal. But more recently, we have been living in an unprecedented environment and social change that has been able to promote these more frequent and intense changes in these environmental factors. And it seems like we have always been 3 or 4 steps behind these changes. And so we need to speed up our understanding, our methods, our techniques to enhance our ability to respond to these changes correctly. And especially in these systems that, the kelp forests are distributed in cold, rich waters. And in the several decades, where it used to be thriving forest, now they're either ocean barrens or something else. So we urge actions to try to understand this and promote some changes. Kelp forests, they're super beautiful, cold forests with a lot of species of birds, mammals, invertebrates, other algae, of course, and support a great diversity of ecosystem services. And you all know this, but this is a graph that we put together just to show that these ecosystem services can be divided in three big groups: regulation, cultural, and provision. One example of provision is fishing. One example of cultural includes recreation, education, and inspiration. And one of the regulation and ecosystem services can be carbon sequestration. And so for that, we have been doing a little bit of estimations with one of our students. Using landside images, we calculated the CO2 capture in Todos Santos Bay, this bay right where Ensenada is, right in front of UABC. And we estimated that a kelp forest in average can trap 8,000 tons of carbon per year. This is more or less 2.3 kilograms of carbon per square meter per year. So there's a lot of research due to this end. As carbon sequestration, you know, it's in kelp forests is still very controversial, but there's no doubt that these amounts of carbon trapped in these systems are big and are very important and relevant for changes in these systems that we need to understand. What there's no question about is fishing. Fishing in kelp forests is supported in almost every single trophic level in the system, so there's no question. But in general, these ecosystem services are suffering in the integrity and their intrinsic value thanks to all these factors of change that include storms, hypoxia, acidification, species invasions, and more recently, heat waves. So talking about heat waves, this is a sea surface temperature in 2010 for this region. And if we go to 2011, 2012, in 2013, we can see a little warm water event anomaly coming into the map. In Mexico, we call it La Mancha. And La Mancha came into the coast in 2013, 14, 15 stayed there. In 16 started going away. 17 seemed to come back normal. But what I want to show is that the system got really hot, and then it got really hot, and then even hotter. And so if you're a kelp forest or a species related to kelp forest, what happens? Well, it happens that we have a marine heat wave, and I'm just going to take a second to describe it the way I think I stole it from Steve Longhart. But it's, you have the mean, the climatological mean of temperature, and then from that you calculate the 90th percentile, and you can plot your data on top of this graph. This is time and temperature on the y-axis. And so there are peaks of temperature that if they are less than 5 days, we call them heat spikes. But if are more than 5 days, we call them marine heat waves. So for this system between 2014 and 2015, we saw 545 marine heat wave days in this region. So imagine being hot and being hot for many, many years. So what happened to kelp forest? Well, it happened from being such a thriving ecosystem to something like that in the surface. The community changed from a diverse ecosystem to something else. In some areas, it turned into a nurture environment, but in some other areas, it turned a paradise for invasive macroalgae. This is Sargassum horneri. But in general, results from this extreme event range from winners to losers. We found that species of winners are pez vieja, cabrillas, langostas, and invasive macroalgae, and the losers included species that have a high economic value for this region, and it's pretty challenging. In a synthesis for this region, to my knowledge, there has been 165 taxonomic groups reported for this for responding to these changes. So there's a lot of changes, and like I say, we are a couple of steps behind, so we need to speed up this somehow together. We have to speed up our response. Also, interesting to note that these drivers of change are working at different scales. This you can see temporal and spatial scales and different things surrounded by different bubbles. But for example, sewage and fishing have local effects, while acidification and sea level rise will have effects at global scales. And while marine heat waves, hypoxic, and upwellings have influence at regional scales, we need to understand this complexity together and try to start building databases that are easy to access, they are live, we are able to see things happening at the same time. So one thing that we have done so far is this paper that I referred at the beginning. We call it the ABC Reef. It's Alaska to Baja Consortium for Reef Monitoring. We combine monitoring programs. We have a lot of data collected by Pisco divers. This is actually not a Pisco diver, and I just realized not long ago, this is Mike Beck doing a survey for Kendra Karin, her PhD thesis at UC Santa Cruz. But this is, I know for sure, this is Elvita. She's one of the Sirenas de Natividad, which is a group of female divers that were trained by Kobe and Phil, and to try to get them out of the fisherman processing plants and get them into the system and actually see what the system was about. And now they're instrumental for keeping up the monitoring program. So these Sirenas de Natividad are amazing, and probably you know some of them. But with this data, this is 2008, 2016, we can see that the total biomass for all the different regions completely collapsed, almost half. And the distribution of the different biomass in the functional groups were color-coded here, changed. This is 2008, and 2016, we have big changes in the north and in the south. And with this, we forecast what will happen in 2015, and obviously there's a huge amount of change. And this change can be color-coded and it can be scary, but we actually found that different functional groups are doing different things, and it's not that as trivial. And so with this graph, it shows how the shifts in functional groups distributions across systems and across region. The x-axis represents the change of the center of distribution for functional groups from north on the right to south to the left. And the y-axis represents the range of expansion for positive values and the range of contractions for negative values. Here I am highlighting kelps and urchins on both, showing a poleward progression and a range of expansion. And these two, obviously, you know, that are key groups in this system. So contractions, expansions, migrations, all this is happening at different functional groups, and it makes it super interesting and challenging at the same time. This is another paper that we work on. This is Isla Todos Santos. This is in front of Ensenada in Todos Santos Bay. This is a list of species of fish. And this ordered by the centroid of the distribution. So this is the Lincoln. Lincoln will have a more northward center of distribution than Caliolatus princeps, La Pierna, or Blanco, how we call it here. So these are ordered by the center of the distribution. As you can see, the blue bars are before the heat wave, and the red bars are after the heat wave. So most of the northern affinity species completely disappear after the heat wave. So different functional groups, different species are migrating or are doing something, changes in their distribution have been very, very interesting to track. For kelp, not all is bad news, right? So in another paper that I was able to participate, led by Kyle, we use the estimations of kelp biomass with satellite images, and we show that there is a great variability in both the resistance and the resilience of these kelp beds. And this image show variability of every 100 kilometers. So these are sections of the coast every 100 kilometers. And this is 1 year, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2016, 17, and after the heat wave, completely after. And you can see if the dots are on this side of this line, it's muy malo. But if the dots after the heat wave are on this side of this line, it's muy bueno. So we found in this analysis that there's places like Bahía Tortugas right here. These kelp beds over here are on the right side of the graph. So that means that they have recovered and they're very resilient. So resistant and resilient. This is somewhere in Punta Baja, and these are some other places in Southern California. So this highlights the importance of oceanographic refuges. For some reason, these places here have recovered and they have the lush kelp beds after all this massive change in the system. So how can we address this unprecedented environmental complexity? And how can we understand this to reduce, or I guess, support adapted capacity of the system? Well, one way to do it is through collaboration and international research. One of the first things that we have realized is that we cannot study this system in isolation. So we have to include humans, you know it, it's been out there, we have to always include them. And so we have this diagram that represents what we call a socio-ecological system for fisheries, for small-scale fisheries. Here you can see a system that is closely related. The ecosystem and the fisheries are closely related and in a feedback loop with the community and the governance that they are taking into this fishing relationship. The arrows indicate these relationships and the feedbacks. But also the system is subject to changes, the climatic changes over here, and that pushes the system to one side or to the other side. And also this other side of this diagram represents external support that tries to ameliorate what these drivers of change are pushing the system back and forth. So it's like an stabilizer. And on top of that, we have these guys over here that are influenced in international markets, international regulations, and the acceleration of social change that we are experiencing today. For example, it's really, society and their needs have been changed drastically in the last year, right? Being at home and changing or behaving completely different to what's normal. So these are things that we have to consider. So that diagram, we can use it to place it somewhere in this matrix and to actually characterize it and understand the complexity of this. So we have ecological scenarios where we have something bad to better. So this is a Scrooge air, winners and losers, so it's bad but not too bad, or complete ecological resiliency. So this is the better one and the least better one. And the same way, we have social scenarios. These are crystallized communities that are super bad, constrained action so the communities can actually do something about it. So it's good, but not too bad, not too good. And complete adaptation. So what you want to be is right here, where there's social adaptation and ecological resiliency, you'll be set. If you are in the opposite end of the matrix, you get into this poverty trap. And this is by many studies, by many other people, climate change are pushing all these ecological systems to this side of the matrix. So what can actually we do to turn those arrows and push our systems to a social adaptation and ecological resiliency? What can we do? And what I've been helping with is to document everything we see, to document what all these changes and potentially find out someone that I can help us change these arrows to the resiliency. So the construction of a underwater monitoring program, it's what we call it MEXCAL, but we also have contributed to the generation of these kelp estimations with using satellite images, and also we've been flying all these drones all over the local kelp forest to try to understand their better scales. Like instead of having 30 by 30, we go almost to 0.5 centimeters. We also have a network with Christy Crocker of Oceanographic Nets. Okay, thank you. We also have a network of oceanographic sensors to monitor temperature, pH, salinity, and dissolved oxygen. We carry out experiments in the lab with growth, survival, environmental changes. And more recently, Fio and Natalie Lowe here, they install a multiple stressor system where you can actually explore temperature, oxygen, dissolved oxygen, and pH in one tank, or actually in 4 different tanks alternatively. And we have a bunch of different experiments, restoration of abalone, sea cucumbers, and sea urchins in the field. We also have this molecular support that we are using, for example, right now in a black abalone project to see if the black abalone natural populations have the xenoaliotis or not, or they have the phagos. Obviously, we do a lot of interviews and game theory experiments. And at the end, I put this one is the integration of all this different information into models. So basically, we're trying to combine experiments, a lot of information from monitoring programs, people, interviews, and sensors into modeling and try to actually go those 2 or 3 steps that we are behind trying to forecast them. One example of these cool oceanographic networks that have been done, this is a paper that it's being prepared by Natalie Lowe. She has these guys, mini dots, all up and down the coast. And you can see, the first thing you can see is all sites are different. This is on the x-axis. It's temperature, on the y-axis is dissolved oxygen. And if we focus on the lower left image, we can see that there is no variability in dissolved oxygen. So the variability is very small in contrast to the temperature, right? But then there are other sites that the variation of dissolved oxygen is huge in comparison and respecting the same variability of temperature. So you can see these multiple stressors playing different roles in different sites. So as you remember that there are oceanographic refuges, well, we can also find them with these mini dot loggers. They're pretty interesting. And so these graphs represent time. The different colors go from October 2017 to September 2018. And if you start here, it comes back like that. And then as the year progresses, it comes back here. So the water, it's warm, then it gets cold, and then very cold gets hypoxic, and then it goes back to where it was. Different to this other side that only travels back and forth in the same dissolved oxygen margin. So these are things that we have been collecting in the field that we're trying to replicate in the lab with these multiple stressors. So you can have individuals where we've done it with abalone, and you keep them in high temperature, medium temperature, or low temperature, and then you put them in a hypoxic simulation, and we have found that the medium temperature are better suited for actually supporting these marine heat waves and hypoxic events. So this is also some of the other type of work that we're doing is the ecological networks. This is a representation of a 41 different functional group network for Isla Natividad. One of our students put it together to run an EcoPath with EcoSim. And you can see the different functional groups, and the y-axis is the trophic levels, and how the system how the system is structured with all these arrows. The energy goes from lower trophic levels to higher trophic levels, and the thickness represents how important these links are based on trophic interactions. And with those, we have used this model to simulate changes in the reduction of pH. And so in this graph shows the result where green bars indicate the direction and magnitude of change. And broadly speaking, this model suggests that macroalgae do relatively well. So they're on this side of the graph, relatively well with more pH in the water, but coralline algae does not do well if you decrease the pH. And you know that coralline algae is almost the caviar for all the great amount of invertebrates we are looking into, like abalone, I don't know, sea urchins and all these guys. Another important suggestion of this effort is that, which is also not trivial, is that increasing an exotic species of sea urchin. So we are looking into these guys. These are the black sea urchin, Arbacea stellata, which is showing up in the system, and it's liking it. It's liking the new conditions, and it's here for staying. So it's interesting to find those things in the model results too. In this model, we not only measure the production, but we also measure other responses that are less steady in relation to ocean acidification. So I think this is the value of these modeling efforts. We explore the response in natural mortality, in the vulnerability in blue, and in the combined. This is the purple. This is the mortality, the vulnerability, all combined. And this again suggests that algae, like Eclonia arborea, like this guy, and fish will be the new normal for this system. Also black sea urchins, and that we need to think about what can we do to adapt to these new normals for the system. And that all these high value products will gradually disappear from our waters, and we need to be ready for that. As you can see, little by little, we have been building this valuable network of information monitoring programs, collaborators, papers, and trying to document this change. But most of our effort, it's only allocated in this part of the problem. We are, yes, including the fisherman in the system, and we can describe drivers and a lot of things, but still the vast majority of what we have documented is not included in the governance, external support, and all these international and other scale drivers of change. And so there's a lot of things that we can do, or we must do sooner than later, that will put us in a better place to understand these changes and do something good about it. We are documenting unprecedented changes. We are extending our cooperation and monitoring networks. Our essentials, we're combining efforts with Reef Check, with PISCO, obviously, with fishermen, with students everywhere up and down the coast, but still, we need to keep doing it. We need to promote these collaborations. One challenge we have is to be able to anticipate ecological responses. And at the beginning, it was an opportunity to have all these tools and all this data available, but now it feels almost an obligation. You go to these fisherman communities, and then you go and show a time series of something, and they say, Rodrigo, come on, we know, we've been fishing this place for so many years. Tell me what's going to happen tomorrow. What's going to happen in 1 month? Should I set up an MPA or don't even bother? Things like that. So it's pretty scary sometimes to go to these communities now. And so support for social ecological adaptation has been highlighted 3 things. We need to keep producing human resources with all these different skills, but also the capacity to merge skills with other partners and do this transdisciplinary assessment of these types of projects or problems. We need to exchange perspective more often with better tools to exchange them and actually build something on top of them, and transfer skill and technologies up and down the coast. Just like all these examples that I put, the system control that Natalie developed, all these super cool thing that Kyle and Tom are doing or have been doing for all these years using the drones and the satellite images, all these things are amazing, and we should keep doing them. And so I think this is my previous to last slide. This is the team. When you come back to Mexico, when I came back to Mexico, there was no such a thing as a Beas lab or someone's lab. You actually come and the system pushes you to work with colleagues and build a lab. And so we have created this lab called MEXCAL, Management of Ecosystems across California, where we are promoting integration, interdisciplinary innovation, and international collaboration. And Julio, this guy over here, he went to UC Santa Barbara for his PhD. He's a invert ecology. He does a lot of work with invasives and parasites. Alicia is our head honcho in genetics. She also went to UC Santa Cruz and she worked at NOAA for many years. Also, he's famous as Eloso. You'll see him if you ever go to Baja, everybody knows Eloso. He does a lot of fisheries management and governance. And finally, Luis, this guy went to Simon Fraser with Cote, and he does a lot of all the invasive stuff too. So this is the team. Please contact them if you have ever some interest on working in Baja. Obviously, this is a team, but there's so many other researchers and data that are available that we can help connect and build and move forward if you are interested. And last, I just want to thank a lot of people, a lot of institutions funding, and super grateful to have had the opportunity to work with all these people, all these institutions. Muchas gracias. Follow me in the Instagram at Mexcal. The students are putting a bunch of pictures, sexy pictures for you guys, if you want to follow us. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any question.
Thank you, Rodrigo, for that talk. It was such a synthesis, and talking about the group approach that is pushed in Mexico is really inspiring to show the work that you guys have done together. There are a few hands up here, and maybe Emily can help me. Let's see how I do this. All right. Let's see. Do I unmute them? Sorry, this is my learning curve, guys. All right.
That's okay. I asked the participants with their hands raised to unmute themselves, and I think Astrid just unmuted
Great,
herself.
Astrid. All right, thank you. And then I have a question. Of course, Mike Graham left with the question. I'll ask that next. Astrid.
Hi, great talk, Rodrigo. Good to hear from you. My curiosity as someone who works deep is if you're seeing any shifts deeper as well as shifts northward. I mean, I know obviously we're talking about primary producers, so you're limited, but you seeing any redistribution in terms of depth ranges?
We don't go deep because I was a deep diver always until now. I have to deal with a program, and if someone dies, I'm responsible. So we never go deep than 40 feet. Like there's no 50 is the top. So we don't know what's happening deeper. And we have done some efforts to bring a ROV into Mexico. It has not worked so far. So we don't know if there are these climatic or oceanographic refugees deeper. We don't know, but you should come with your toys. We take you everywhere you want. Yeah, we're very cute.
Go on.
So please.
Well, then there's room to do more work in collaboration for all of you out there. Bobby Domler, you have your hand up. You want to unmute yourself? I don't. Maybe he disappeared. Okay. Well, while we're waiting for the next one, then I'll go to Jackson. There's a question from Mike Graham, which is anyone trying to quantify the changes in economic value of kelp forest resources in pre versus post tropicalization? So the economics of the kelp beds, pre and post.
I know there are people thinking about it, trying to measure it. I don't know if there's a paper published about it, but there was a UC Mexus collaborative grant that I think Octavio Aburto's group got it. So, and you know that group is kind of an academic relative from Enric Sala, who put prices on the mangroves and all those papers. So if there's someone that can actually put a good value on things, is that group. So I think they've been working on it. I haven't seen if they have published anything, but Octavio Aburto and his group will definitely have something to say about it.
Great, thanks. Are there any other questions out there?
Yeah, I'm unmuted, so I'll ask.
Jackson.
Yeah. Thank you for the talk. I had a question about those invasive black urchins. Do you know if they're a southern species moving and invading north, or are they from somewhere else?
Yeah, they're more tropical affinity. And what we think has happened, we're working on trying to document that in a research manner, but we think in one of these events, recruitment happened and actually got into estuaries. And they like in estuary. You go to estuaries here in Baja, and you can see all these urchins surviving there and staying there when the water cools down. And then when the water warms up again, they just go and keep like doing a stepping stone kind of tropicalization. They're super interesting. This is Arbacea estellata. Check it out. These guys are black sea urchins. They at first light, you see, oh, this is a purple sea urchin, and they look in between the purples and the reds. But then if you keep looking closer, you can see the features there. They're pretty, but they're taking over, definitely. Scary.
Wow, that's really interesting that they're using the estuaries as like a stepping stone. Thank you so much.
Right.
We have another question from Bobby Damier. You can unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay, cool. I think I did it this time, right?
Yep,
Can you hear me? Okay, sweet. Yeah. Sorry, my headphones weren't connected to the Zoom, but they were connected to the computer, so I didn't know. And it's Dallmeyer, just that way you know, Diana. But thank you so much, Rodrigo. That was a great talk. I loved it. I mean, I hate the news, right? But it was very interesting to hear about all the stuff that we're learning. And I especially found that diving thing about not going deep really funny. Good question answer. That was great. But I wanted to ask you, you had a really cool slide about the different, it had the California, Baja like coastline, and then it showed like the different kelp forest populations and whether they had done okay and recovered or not with the refuge, basically the different refuge habitats or sites. And I was wondering, is anybody monitoring, like, if, you know, other sites that had good kelp forests and then maybe lost them, if, you know, there's recolonization, if anybody's looking at, like, whether the kelp are coming from the refuges or if they're coming from, like, you know, the gametophyte seed bank, as they say. Is anybody investigating that? Because I just think that'd be super interesting to find out, you know, how that all works.
I think you're talking about this one, this graph, right? And probably, can you see it? Can you see my screen? Is that?
Yes, we can see that.
And it's what you're talking about, right? And let me see. And
yeah, so, that one.
God, dang. So maybe this side right here. Oh, this side right here, this is Bahia Tortugas, right here. Man, and Mike Graham is here, and a bunch of you guys know that it's been very controversial for many years. For I think it's 1999, a paper by my master's advisor, Lydia Lada. She said initially that after El Nino, there was a seed bank of kelp, like buried in the rocks or in between cracks and crevices, that after the El Nino passed, these guys just came back to life and make kelp forests thrive again. There's also the other version from, I guess, Dan Reed. Probably he's the one that it's more advocating that it's rafts, like a raft, like floating around in the ocean with a lot of gametophytes. Like it will probably make a kelp forest come back to life after these extreme events. I don't know, man. I wish I don't know. I don't want to say anything that will hurt feelings, but I think both of those ideas are a little bit too crazy, but maybe, I don't know. What do you guys think? Can someone help me?
Well, I was thinking because maybe you could, I know Kyle works a bit with Felipe Alberto in Wisconsin, but he does all the genetic stuff, because maybe that's something that, I don't know how much, I know they're collaborating on a grant. I don't know if like maybe that's something that you can collaborate with him on too. That would probably be pretty interesting to look at, because it's a really interesting natural experiment, right? Where we did a clearing, you know, but it's not something that you're having to do you know, so I don't know, it'd be cool. It'd be cool to observe that and kind of see what's going on, but you know, it is extra work, right? So who has time for that?
Yeah, so let me say something about this, because I think you highlight something really cool. Can you, oh God, dang. I'm trying to put the pen. So for many years, with all this controversy, if they can come back, or the seeds, or the boating of floating kelp, whatever, it's been always thought that this area right here was like our crystal ball. Whatever happens there, it's going to happen to California in a couple of years, and we better understand this system. And so, as we can see in this graph, it's not true. This guy, it doesn't matter what happens here, if the kelp forest will come back. But we have more, the more we document all these changes, we see right here, this area, it's called the Seven Sisters. All the surfers know it. It's super remote. This is where the road comes from the coast inland. And so from going on the highway to these places is really tough. It's like many hours of dirt road. So this area, it's actually the crystal ball right now. Extreme marine heat waves, hypoxic events, all these things have been changing the community structure there in a way that it's more clear that the transition to northward system is going to mimic these changes that we've been seeing right now. There's all these cool things about coevolution, like how here a species from the south and species from the north are being combined, are being pushed to interact, and predation and competition things have been happening here that it's very, very interesting to study. So I will argue, if we're going to put some time and effort, help us study this area, because this is going to be really interesting in the next couple of years.
There's a question here from Scott Hamilton.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. What's up, Rodrigo?
Hola.
As a fish guy, of course, I love the message that, hey, these kelp forests in the future are going to get overrun by more fish. So, I mean, my question is, I guess, how are the fishermen in Mexico kind of responding to these, these predictions? The invertebrate fisheries are doing more poorly, but maybe the fin fish resources might do better. Do you see them kind of preparing to maybe shift what type of species they're fishing for, or change their portfolios in different ways to respond to the changing climate?
Yeah, that's a cool question. And we have been criticized in that GBC paper that we say fish are going to be well. But before I answer your question, I want to say that when marine heat waves happen and kelp goes away, it's just way easier to count fish and count them bigger. So there might be something there that we need to study. But yes, there is this program called Fisheries Improvement Projects. I don't know if you know about them, but Google them. They're super interesting. It's like a eco-tag, like, fair trade or MSC certifications for different fisheries. So these guys come to places like Mexico and they say, okay, you have verdillo. Verdillo is a Paralabrax nebulifer. Then you have verdillo, you have a fishery. Let's look at that fishery and improve it. And so you got into this program of developing better the whole fishery, not just the catching, but the commercialization, the process, the who is buying it, and instead of catching 20, it's like the fish waste. Like instead of catching 20, just catch one, but you're going to sell it with very, very price. So they've been doing that with that one specifically. That I know that it's the best example because it's been always in the portfolio. When there's nothing else to catch, they put a trap, because they catch it with traps. They put a trap for verdillo, and it happens all up and down the coast. So verdillo is a good example that they are kind of adapting to those kinds of fisheries, and they are trying to do it in a good way with the support of these FIPs, the fishery improvement projects.
That's nice. Yeah, as they expand their fisheries, they're doing it more sustainably than they would have in the past. So yeah, that's
Right.
great to hear. Thank you.
There's Blanco to Caliolatus princeps is another one, but that one, it's funny because every Blanco that we catch in Baja, it goes to San Diego because they pay better there. It's interesting that one is subsidizing another country, another system. Verdillo,
Borders don't matter once again, right?
yeah.
Thanks, Rodrigo.
All right. I want to, for all of you you can unmute yourself if you would like, and your video, and we're going to say thank you to our speaker, and then we can all take a break. If people want to stick around, there are some people that could stick around and ask some questions. There were some requests for that. So Rodrigo said he would stick around and buy us all a cold Mexican beverage that we could share someday. And I just want to say thank you to Rodrigo for giving us that talk on kelp beds. Thanks. Muchas gracias.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Rodrigo.
We would